Sometimes God doesn't remove the weakness. He redeems it. You've been praying for strength when all along His grace was the strength. See, grace doesn't just cover what's broken. It carries you through it. Because the same God who saw your struggle already designed your survival. Grace doesn't excuse your weakness. It empowers you through it. You see, too often we think grace is a get out of jail-free card for the moments we fall short, for the days when our faith flickers, or for the times when our strength feels like it's slipping through our fingers. But grace was never meant to be an excuse. It was meant to be an engine. It's not a soft pillow to rest our excuses on. It's the supernatural fuel that gets us up when we can't find the strength to stand. Grace is not passive. It's power in motion. It's the invisible hand of God reaching into your broken places and saying, "You're still mine, and I'm not done with you yet." When Paul said in 2 Corinthians, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness," he wasn't describing a theory, he was describing an encounter. He had wrestled with his own limitations. He had begged God to take away what hurt, what hindered, what made him feel less than capable. But instead of removal, God gave him revelation grace. And that's what so many of us miss. We think if God really loved us, He'd take away the struggle, silence the storm, or erase the weakness. But sometimes grace shows up not to take it away, but to teach you how to rise within it. Grace whispers, "I'll meet you in the middle of your mess and show you my strength right there." A grace is God's way of saying, "You don't have to be enough because I already am." The world will tell you to hustle harder, to push through, to earn your worth. But grace says, "You can rest in me." When you're walking through seasons where your confidence is shaking and your courage feels small, grace doesn't say, "Shame on you." Grace says, "Stand up. You still belong here." It's the voice that speaks louder than condemnation, the embrace that meets you at your lowest and pulls you back toward purpose. It's what covers you when your discipline fails, when your plans fall apart, when your strength gives out. Grace steps in and says, "Let me take it from here." The beauty of grace is that it meets you right where you are, but it refuses to leave you there. Grace transforms, it empowers, it activates. God's grace doesn't turn a blind eye to your flaws. It uses them as a stage for His glory. When you understand grace, you stop running from your weakness and start surrendering it. You stop hiding your cracks because you realize that's where the light comes through. The same hands that molded the universe are molding you thought would break you. Grace isn't just a covering. It's a current, a flow of divine strength that carries you when your legs can't. When you walk with grace, you start to see your weaknesses differently. You realize that the place you used to despise about yourself, the fear, the insecurity, the mistake that won't let you forget, might just be the exact place where God wants to show you His strength. That's why some of the most powerful people ever meet aren't the ones who never fell. They're the ones who learned how to get back up by grace. They've been through storms that should have destroyed them, but grace kept whispering, "Keep walking." They've been misunderstood, overlooked, and underestimated, yet grace kept saying, "You still matter. There's still more for you." Sometimes, the greatest empowerment doesn't come when the weakness disappears. It comes when you finally realize you're not walking alone. Grace is God saying, "You can do all things through me." It's the quiet assurance that even when you fall short, His love doesn't. Grace will take the very thing too and turn it into the thing that builds you. It'll take your tears and water your growth. It'll take your scars and turn them into testimonies. Grace empowers you not just to survive the storm, but to walk out of it carrying lessons, strength, and an unshakable faith that says, "If God brought me through that, He can bring me through anything." You don't have to perform for grace. You just have to receive it. It's not earned, it's embraced. That's the hardest part for some of us, because we've been taught that love must be deserved and success must be earned. But grace breaks all those rules. Grace walks into your failure, sits down beside your shame, and says, "Let's start again." Grace doesn't keep a record of your wrongs. It keeps a record of your redemption. Every time you thought you were finished, grace was rewriting your future. Every time you thought it was over, grace was whispering, "I'm just getting started." And that's why grace empowers. It reminds you that your story is not over. The weakness that once made you feel disqualified becomes the very reason others are drawn to your testimony. Because people aren't moved by perfection. They're moved by grace. They don't need to see how flawless you are. They need to see how faithful God has been to you. When they see someone standing in strength after walking through struggle, they don't just see you, the God's grace in motion. So, stop apologizing for being in process. Stop hiding behind the illusion of strength when grace wants to do something greater in you. Let grace empower your next step, your next prayer, your next yes. Because grace is not an excuse to stay weak. It's the invitation to rise strong. It doesn't let you sit in shame. It teaches you to stand in truth. It lifts your chin, wipes your tears, and says, "You are still chosen." Grace doesn't wait until you have it all together. It meets you in your weakness, and it makes you powerful right there. You may not feel strong right now, but grace says, that's okay. You don't have to be. Because where your strength ends, His begins. Grace is not the absence of weakness. It's the evidence of God's presence in it. It's the reminder that you are still held, still loved, still called. Grace doesn't excuse your weakness. It empowers you to walk through it with faith, with hope, and with a quiet confidence that the same God who carried you yesterday will carry you again today. And when you finally let His grace do the lifting, you'll realize you were never weak. You were just being prepared for His strength to shine through you. Your struggle is not a sign of failure. It's a stage for God's faithfulness. So many times, when life hits hard and plans fall apart, we immediately assume something must be wrong with us. We think if we were stronger, smarter, more disciplined, we wouldn't be struggling the way we are. But can I tell you something? Struggle is not a punishment, it's a process. It's the space between who you were and who God is shaping you to become. And just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's unsuccessful. The struggle doesn't mean you've lost. It means God is still working. Every time you feel the pressure, the confusion, the waiting, it's not proof that He left you. It's proof that He's preparing you. We live in a culture that celebrates arrival but hides the process. Everyone wants the breakthrough, but no one wants the breaking. We want the crown, but not the cross, the glory, but not the grind. Yet the truth is, the faithfulness of God shines brightest in the seasons where your strength is weakest. When you can't see the way forward, but you still choose to trust Him anyway, that's where faith becomes real. Struggle doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're being stretched. God never promised an easy road. He promised a faithful presence. So when the road gets rough and your steps feel heavy, remember, this is not the end. This is the middle, and God does His best work in the middle. When the Israelites stood at the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind them, they weren't standing in failure. They were standing in the setup for one of the greatest displays of God's faithfulness in history. What looked like a trap was actually a stage. God wasn't late. He was getting ready to reveal Himself. That's what your struggle is. An opportunity for God to show up in a way that leaves no doubt about who brought you through. When you reach the end of yourself, that's when you discover the beginning of Him. Struggle strips away the illusion of control so you can finally see the one who's been in control all along. It's easy to praise God when life is peace or answered, when doors open easily. But real faith is forged in the fire of delay, disappointment, and doubt. That's where the roots go deep. That's where God whispers, I'm still here. You see, He's not just the God of the mountaintop. He's the God of the midnight. He's faithful in the famine just like He is in the feast. When your plans collapse, His purpose still stands. When your heart breaks, His love holds. You may not understand the season you're in, but that doesn't mean it's wasted. Struggle is the soil where strength grows. Sometimes, God allows the struggle not to show you your weakness, but to show you His consistency. Because when everything around you feels unstable, His faithfulness remains your anchor. He doesn't shift with your emotions or disappear when you doubt. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. That means the same God who carried you through the last storm will carry you through this one too. Your pain doesn't cancel His promise. Your tears don't erase His truth. You may be in the middle of the storm, but you're still in the center of His will. You've got to stop interpreting struggle as failure. Struggle is a sign that you're still fighting, that you're still gonna have faith enough to keep moving. Even when you stumble, even when you question, you're still in the fight. And that's what grace looks like in motion. God standing with you in the very place you thought He'd leave you. The enemy wants you to think your struggle disqualifies you, but God says it's evidence that you're still chosen. If the struggle wasn't shaping something powerful inside you, the enemy wouldn't be fighting you so hard. What you're facing is not punishment, it's preparation. Think about it. Every hero in the Bible had to wrestle with struggle before they walked in strength. Joseph was thrown into a pit before he reached the palace. David was hiding in caves before he sat on the throne. Esther had to risk her life before she saved her people. And Jesus, the Son of God, had to endure the cross before resurrection power could be revealed. Struggle didn't signify their failure. It positioned them for fulfillment. What you're walking through is not random. It's rehearsing you for something greater. God doesn't waste pain. Every tear, every test, every delay. It's all working together for your good and His glory. The problem is we often want deliverance when God is trying to build dependence. We want Him to take us out of the struggle, but sometimes His faithfulness is proven by keeping us in it and sustaining us through it. He wants you to know Him not just as a provider, but as a sustainer. He wants to show you that His grace isn't just enough to get you started. It's enough to carry you through. The same God who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it. You may not see the full picture right now, but trust in every struggle is part of the masterpiece. When you look back, you'll realize the places you thought were failures were actually faith-building moments. The tears that felt wasted were watering the seeds of purpose. The delays that frustrated you were developing your patience. The rejection that hurt you was redirection towards something better. You'll look back and say, I didn't understand it then, but God was faithful all along. That's what struggle reveals. His consistency in your chaos, His strength in your surrender, His love in your lowest moments. So lift your head even in the middle of the storm. You're not losing, you're learning. You're not breaking down, you're being built up. The struggle is not a detour, it's the design. You may feel like everything is falling apart, but in God's hands, it's all falling into place. Faith doesn't mean you won't face trouble. It means you'll face it knowing you're not alone. And when you stand on the other side of this, stronger, wiser, more grounded in His love, you'll realize the struggle wasn't failure. It was favor in disguise. Your struggle is the stage where God performs His greatest miracles. Don't rush off of it too soon. Let Him finish the scene. Because when the curtain rises and the story unfolds, everyone, including you, will see that the struggle was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to display His faithfulness. Every scar will tell a story. Every setback will sing of His strength. And every pain will point to His promise. The struggle doesn't mean you failed. It means God is about to show you just how faithful He really is. What you call broken, God calls building material. We often look at our lives through the lens of what's missing, what's damaged, what didn't work out. We see the shattered pieces of our past and wonder how anything beautiful could come from them. But God has a different perspective. He doesn't see your brokenness as the end of your story. He sees it as the beginning of His masterpiece. What looks like ruins to you looks like raw material to Him. Every failure, every heartbreak, every disappointment becomes a brick in the foundation of something greater. You may be standing in the debris of what was, but God is already drafting the blueprint of what will be. When you say, God, I'm broken, He doesn't flinch. He doesn't walk away. He rolls up His sleeve, says, perfect. Now I can work with this. Because God doesn't build with perfection. He builds with pieces. The world teaches you to hide your cracks, to mask your pain, to pretend you've got it all together. But grace says, show me your scars. Because it's in those places where He breathes His presence the strongest. He specializes in taking what was broken and making it whole, not by erasing its history, but by redeeming it. That's why when He restores something, it always comes back stronger, deeper, and more purposeful than before. Think of a mosaic. From a distance, it's stunning, colors and shapes arranged in beauty and balance. But up close, it's made of broken glass. Shattered fragments that once seemed useless have been intentionally placed to reflect light in a new way. That's what God does with your life. The pieces that cut you, the seasons that crushed you, the moments that confused you. He's fitting them together in patterns you can't see yet. And when He's finished, what once represented your pain will become a portrait of His power. The mistake we make is assuming that being broken disqualifies us from being used. But God does His best work with people who know what it's like to fall apart. The woman at the well had a shattered reputation, but Jesus turned her story into a revival. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, yet became the rock on which the church was built. Paul persecuted believers before he became the author of most of the New Testament. Their past wasn't polished. It was painful, but God used it all as building material. The same is true for you. What you see as disqualification, God sees as preparation. Every broken place in your life becomes a platform for His grace to stand on. We say, God, I can't build with this. It's too messy, too damaged, too old. And He says, watch me. Because His hands know how to take what you thought was wasted and turn it into wisdom. He doesn't need perfection to perform His promise. In fact, He prefers imperfection because that's where His glory shines brightest. When you finally surrender your brokenness to Him, you give Him permission to turn it into beauty. You stop trying to glue it together yourself, and you let Him craft something you could have never imagined. Sometimes God will let something break so He can rebuild it right. That relationship that fell apart, that dream that crumbled, that plan that didn't fold the way you hoped. It's not random. It's reconstruction. You were trying to build on unstable ground, and He loved you enough to shake it down so He could lay a better foundation. Brokenness hurts, but it also humbles. It makes you teachable. It clears the noise of pride and self-sufficiency and leaves you with one prayer. God, I can't do this without you. And that's exactly where He does His best work. Right in the middle of your surrender. The truth is, what you call broken, God calls usable. He's not intimidated by the parts of you that are still healing. He's not disappointed in your cracks. He's drawn to them. Because where you see damage, He sees destiny. Every scar becomes a story that points back to His goodness. Every wound becomes a window for His light to shine through. You've been trying to hide your imperfections, but those very imperfections might be the invitation someone else needs to believe God can work with them too. When people see you standing in strength after being shattered, they'll know it wasn't you. It was God. Don't rush out of your rebuilding season. It may not feel glorious, but it's necessary. God is laying new foundations, new strength, new perspective. You're not behind, you're being rebuilt. The enemy wants you to see yourself as damaged goods, but God says, you're under construction. There's a difference between being broken and being built. One ends in despair, the other ends in destiny. You may be walking through dust and debris right now, but don't mistake progress for destruction. Before God builds up, He often has to break down what wasn't meant to last. Maybe the reason your plans fell apart is because God had to remove what couldn't sustain your purpose. Maybe He let certain things crumble because He knew your calling required a stronger structure. So if it broke, trust that it wasn't meant to hold you. Let Him rebuild you His way. Stop mourning the pieces and start trusting the process. Every time you hand Him a broken part of your heart, He turns it into a testimony. Every time you surrender your shame, He replaces it with strength. He's not done with you. He's developing you. And when the building is complete, you'll look back and realize the cracks didn't make you weak. They made you whole. You'll understand that every tear was mortar holding your faith together. Every setback was scaffolding for your growth. You'll see that you were never really breaking down. You were breaking open. Open to healing, open to grace. Open to the kind of strength that doesn't come from perfection, but from presence. So the next time you feel broken, remember, God's not panicking over your pieces. He's gathering them. He's aligning them. He's crafting them into something greater than you can imagine. What you call broken, He calls building material. Because He's not just the God who creates, He's the God who rebuilds. And when He's done, your story won't just be about what broke you. It'll be about what built you. The weight that feels unbearable is the very thing God is using to strengthen your wings. There are moments in life when the pressure feels too heavy to bear, when the responsibilities, losses, and expectations crush you from every side. You try to stay strong, but the weight keeps pressing and you wonder, God, how much more can I take? But what if the heaviness you're feeling isn't punishment? It's preparation. What if the thing you've been trying to escape is the very thing God is using to elevate you? Because growth doesn't happen in comfort, and flight isn't learned on flat ground. You can't soar without resistance. And sometimes, the only way for God to strengthen your wings is to allow you to feel the weight. Every eagle learns to fly by being pushed out of the nest. The mother eagle doesn't wait for her baby to feel ready. She stirs up the nest. She removes the comfort. She pushes it into the wind. It's terrifying. The baby eagle flaps wildly, trying not to fall. But in that moment of falling, strength begins to build. What once felt like punishment becomes purpose. The struggle to stay in the air develops the muscles needed to fly higher than ever before. That's what God does with us. He stirs up the nest. He shakes a foundation, and suddenly everything familiar feels unstable. But He's not trying to destroy you. He's trying to develop you. The weight is not meant to bury you. It's meant to build you. You've been praying for God to remove the pressure, but sometimes He allows it to remain so that you can discover what He placed inside you. Because there are parts of your strength that only reveal themselves under strain. A weightlifter doesn't grow muscle by avoiding the weights, but by embracing them. The very thing that feels like it's breaking you is actually shaping you into someone who can handle more. That's why you can't despise the weight. It's working for you. The tears, the confusion, the long nights, they're training your endurance. You're being equipped for something greater than you can see. It's in the seasons of heaviness that you learn what it means to rely on grace. When everything's easy, you can depend on your own strength. But when life gets hard, when the weight becomes unbearable, you realize that grace is what carries you. That's when faith stops being an idea and becomes a lifestyle. You stop asking, why me? And start saying, use me. Because if God allowed this weight, there's purpose in it. He's not trying to crush you, He's conditioning you. You may not see it now, but one day you'll look back and thank Him for the strength you gained in the struggle. The problem is that most of us equate pressure with punishment. We assume that if life feels heavy, God must be displeased. But that's not how He works. God applies pressure to reveal power. You've been asking for growth, for wisdom, for strength, and this is how He delivers it. Strength doesn't come from ease. It's born in endurance. So when you feel like life is pushing you down, understand that God is positioning you to rise. You can't lift others if you've never lifted anything yourself. You can't speak from power if you've never walked through pressure. Think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He felt the full weight of His assignment pressing on Him until He sweat drops of blood. It was unbearable, yet He endured. That crushing moment was not defeat, it was preparation for resurrection. The weight of the cross was the tool that lifted salvation for the world. What looked like suffering was actually the setup for glory. In the same way, your Gethsemane moment, the place that feels too heavy, too painful, too uncertain, might just be where God is forming your greatest strength. The oil of anointing only flows after the olive is crushed. So don't despise the crushing. It's creating something sacred within you. You may feel like your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, like God is silent while you're sinking. But silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes God steps back not because he's distant, but because he's developing something deep inside you. Like a trainer watching his student lift heavier than before, he knows when to spot you and when to let you push through the resistance. Because he knows you can handle more than you think. You've been saying, God, this is too much. But he's saying, you're stronger than you realize. The same God who allowed the weight is the one who will make sure it doesn't break you. Every burden has a blessing attached to it. Every struggle is a seed of strength waiting to bloom. But to get there, you have to stop running from the weight. You have to trust that the pressure has purpose. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Gold is refined by fire. Winds are strengthened in the wind. Nothing valuable is created in ease. The same principle applies to your spirit. God is refining you, stretching you, and making sure that when you rise, you won't collapse under the altitude. He's preparing you for a level that requires a different kind of strength, a strength that only comes from surviving the struggle. You've been asking God to lift the burden, but maybe he's asking you to lift your perspective. Instead of saying, this weight is too heavy, start saying, this weight is training me. Because once you change your perspective, you change your endurance. When you understand that every challenge is contributing to your calling, you stop feeling crushed and start feeling constructed. The weight doesn't disappear, but it becomes meaningful. You realize that God is not against you. He's working in you. There will come a day when the very thing that once made you cry will make you stronger. You'll look back and realize that it wasn't the easy seasons that built you. It was the heavy ones. You'll see that every burden birthed a new level of belief. Every tear watered your resilience. Every heartbreak revealed your heart for God. And when you finally spread your wings, you'll understand why the weight had to be there. Because without resistance, there is no lift. So, if you're under pressure right now, don't give up. Don't assume God has abandoned you. He's closer than ever. He's teaching you to rise above what once held you down. The same God who allowed the storm is the one who's using it to help you soar. The weight that feels unbearable is not your enemy. It's your elevation. It's building your capacity to carry more, to love deeper, to walk bolder. And when this season is over, you won't just survive, you'll fly. Because those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. You're not breaking under the weight. You're becoming stronger for the flight. When you stop striving and start surrendering, grace begins to carry what your strength couldn't. We live in a world that glorifies hustle, performance, and productivity. Everywhere you turn, someone is telling you to do more, achieve more, become more. The message is loud. If you're not grinding, you're not growing. But what happens when you've given your all and it still doesn't seem like enough? What happens when your body is tired, your mind is weary, and your spirit feels empty? That's when grace steps in. Grace doesn't wait for your perfection. It meets you in your exhaustion. It whispers, you don't have to keep carrying this alone. Because the truth is, the life of faith isn't built on striving. It's built on surrender. Striving says, I have to make it happen. Surrender says, God, have your way. Striving depends on your own ability. Surrender depends on his sovereignty. There comes a point where your strength will reach its limit, not because you failed, but because God never designed you to do it all in your own power. When you finally release your need to control, you make room for divine intervention. The same hands that form the universe are ready to hold your heart if you'd only let go of what you're gripping so tightly. Sometimes we cling so hard to a want that we end up blocking what we need. Surrender is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's realizing that grace can do more with your open hands than your striving ever could with closed fists. It's human nature to want to fix, to plan, to prove. We want to show the world that we can handle it, that we're strong enough, smart enough, spiritual enough. But there's a quiet kind of power that comes when you finally stop trying to be everything and start trusting God to be who he's always been, faithful. Surrender isn't about giving up, it's about giving over. It's handing God the steering wheel and saying, even if I don't understand the route, I trust your direction. That's when peace enters. That's when grace starts carrying what your effort couldn't. Because grace was never meant to compete with your strength, it was meant to complete it. When you're striving, life feels heavy because you're trying to carry burdens you were never built to hold. You try to make everyone happy, fix every problem, and control every outcome. But surrender frees you. It reminds you that you are not the source, you are the vessel. The pressure to perform fades when you realize that your role is not to be perfect, but to be available. God isn't asking for perfection. He's asking for permission to step in, to take over, to move in ways you can't. When you stop striving, you allow his power to show up in your weakness. That's when miracles happen. That's when peace starts to fill the cracks that effort never could. Look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't strive his way to the cross. He surrendered to it in his most human moment. When the weight of his calling felt unbearable, he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." That's the essence of surrender. It's not passive, it's powerful. It's not defeat, it's divine alignment. Jesus wasn't weak when he surrendered. He was walking in the strength of obedience. And through that surrender, the greatest act of redemption unfolded. The same principle applies to you. When you surrender your plan, your pride, your timeline, you make room for resurrection power to move. God can do more with your surrender than you could ever do with your striving. Surrender doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you stop fighting battles that don't belong to you. You stop trying to open doors that God already has the key for. It's the moment you exhale after holding your breath for too long and say, "God, I can't, but I know you can." That's where peace replaces panic. That's where strength is renewed. You may still face challenges, but you'll face them differently, no longer drained, but divinely carried. Because grace doesn't remove the burden. It shifts how you bear it. It gives you the strength to stand even when you're tired and the courage to trust even when you can't see. The hardest part about surrender is that it requires trust. You have to trust that God's timing is better than yours, that his no is protection and not punishment, that his silence is not absence but strategy. We often delay our peace because we're too busy trying to do God's job. We worry, manipulate, plan, and panic, all while grace is standing there saying, "If you just rest, I'll handle this." God doesn't need your performance, he desires your partnership. He's not impressed by how long you can hold together. He's moved when you finally let him hold you. When you start to live from surrender instead of striving, your life begins to flow instead of force. You begin to realize that grace has already gone before you. Doors open that you didn't knock on. Opportunities find you that you didn't chase. Peace becomes your default posture, not because life is perfect, but because you've learned to rest in the one who is. Striving drains you because it depends on you. Surrender sustains you because it depends on God. You were never meant to carry the full weight of your calling alone. That's why grace exists, to fill the gap between your ability and his promise. There's a freedom that comes when you realize you don't have to earn what's already been given. You don't have to hustle for what's already been promised. You don't have to prove what God has already approved. Grace is not a paycheck, it's a gift. And when you stop striving, you finally have hands free enough to receive it. The enemy wants to keep you exhausted because an exhausted believer is an ineffective believer. But a surrendered believer, one who rests in grace, is unstoppable. Because when grace carries you, no storm can drown you, no setback can stop you, no failure can define you. So maybe this is the moment you stop fighting what God is trying to finish. Maybe this is where you stop pushing and stop proving and start trusting. You've been carrying this weight too long. Lay it down. Let grace take over. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to faith it out. Because grace is already working behind the scenes, aligning what your effort couldn't, healing what your striving couldn't fix, and carrying what your strength couldn't hold. And when you look back, you'll realize that surrender was never about losing control. It was about gaining peace. You'll see that every time you let go, God showed up. Every time you stopped striving, something shifted. Grace became your rhythm, peace became your portion, and rest became your strength. When you stop striving and start surrendering, you step out of exhaustion and into empowerment. You move from carrying the weight to being carried by grace. And that's when you finally understand. You were never meant to do this alone. You were meant to soar in surrender. There comes a moment when weight you've been carrying meets the wonder of God's grace. And that's where transformation begins. You start to see that grace was never meant to be your last resort. It was always supposed to be your first response. You realize that God never asked you to be perfect. He asked you to be present. He never demanded that you have all the answers. He simply wanted your surrender. Because it's not your strength that holds your life together. It's his grace that carries it through. Every struggle you've faced, every tear you've cried, every time you've fallen and wondered if you'd ever rise again, God was there. His grace didn't abandon you in your weakness. It covered you. It wrapped around your mistakes like a safety net and whispered, "You're still mine." Grace doesn't erase the struggle, but it changes how you move through it. It takes what was meant to break you and uses it to build you. It turns your weakness into a testimony, your pain into power, your process into purpose. When you look back, you'll see the moments when you thought you were breaking were really the moments God was bending you towards something greater. You'll see that grace wasn't just carrying you through the storm. It was teaching you how to walk on water. You'll understand that the weight of the struggle didn't crush you because grace was beneath you the whole time. That's the beauty of God's love. It doesn't just rescue you, it rebuilds you. It doesn't just forgive you, it fortifies you. So as you walk out of this season, don't be ashamed of your weakness. Wear it as proof of God's strength. Don't hide your scars, they're evidence that grace won. You are not standing where you are because you figured everything out. You're standing because grace refused to let you fall. Every step you take now is not powered by striving but by surrender. You're walking in a rhythm that says, God, I may not have it all together, but I trust that you do. And that's the shift. When your faith stops being about performance and starts being about presence. When you stop fighting to prove yourself and start resting in the fact that you're already chosen. When you stop worrying about how you'll make it through and start believing that grace already has a plan. Because grace doesn't just cover your weakness. It carries your story, your struggle, and your soul. So today, lift your head, take a deep breath, and let go of what you were never meant to carry alone. The same grace that met you in your lowest moment is the same grace that's about to lift you to your next level. You're not surviving, you're becoming. You're not failing. You're being formed. You're not falling apart. You're falling into purpose. Let God's grace cover your weakness. Let it carry you through the struggle. Because when you finally stop trying to control the outcome, you'll start to see how beautifully God has been orchestrating every detail. You'll find peace where there was once panic, strength where there was once surrender, and joy where there was once just survival. Grace has you. It had you yesterday. It has you today. And it will have you tomorrow. So walk in it, rest in it, believe in it. Because when grace carries you, no storm can sink you, no struggle can stop you, and no weakness can define you. You are covered, you are carried, and you are called for such a time as this.